Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. Welcome to Message to Movement, Winning at Being You Worldwide. I'm your host, Coach Mills Rogers. This is a space where we have real conversations with people who are using their voice, their experiences, and their purpose to create impact, not just for themselves, but for others. Today, I'm excited to be joined by DrWill Moreland. We're going to talk about leadership, transformation, and what it actually looks like to win at being who you are without pretending or performing. If you're watching live, feel free to drop where you're watching from in the comments. Now, let's get into it. Dr. Will Moreland is a leadership expert, best-selling author, and former military officer with over 30 years of experience developing leaders and high-performing teams. He has worked across military, government, nonprofit, and corporate environments, helping organizations drive excellence through clarity, ownership, and culture. Dr. Moreland is the creator of the Beyond 9 to 5 framework, a leadership and culture reset designed to move teams from compliance to commitment. His work is grounded in real world results and focused on helping leaders take care of people while delivering mission driven performance. Dr. Will, I'm glad to have you today.
My man, Coach Mills, man, I'm super excited to be here with you, man. Thank you for the invite.
So, for people who don't know who you are yet, how do you usually explain what you help people with?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. And so for me, man, I am a leadership expert. I work with leaders from different types of organizations, as you said in my bio, throughout the government, throughout nonprofit. And my overall mission is just to help leaders go from being average leaders to being phenomenal leaders.
Awesome, awesome. And so I followed you for a few years now, man, and you have a real compelling story. And so I want to kind of talk a little bit about that. You came from Compton, and we've us Generation Xers, we all know about Compton. And so you were kind of deep into that. And so when you look back at your teenage years in Compton, you obviously had a mindset shift. And so what mindset shift saved you? And if you want to talk a little bit more about where you was at and then how you got to where you're at now, go for it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I tell people all the time, growing up in Compton, I always used to say it was the best of times and it was the worst of times because I was raised primarily by my grandmother growing up. My beginning years, I was raised by my grandmother. My grandmother was in the church. She was into community service. So inside the house, I was learning about faith. I was learning about civic duty. I was learning about integrity and character. All of those things that make you a good person. But then outside of the house, that's the story you're talking about, where Compton, it was riddled with gang violence. It was riddled with drugs. It had a lot of bad examples. And so, unfortunately, although my grandmother, she was teaching me all the right things, I was overcome by the influences of outside. And so started hanging out with the wrong people, getting into trouble. And it culminated when I was 19 years old. I was in front of a judge getting ready to face 6 years in jail. And he told me, he said, "Mr. Moreland, if I sentence you today, it will be with you for the rest of your life. What I'm going to do for you is I'm going to give you 2 weeks. I'm going to give you 2 weeks to figure out what you're going to do with your life. And I want you to come back to this court and tell me." Well, Mills, to be honest with you, I had no clue what I was going to do, what I was going to say. So when I left that courtroom, in my mind, I was on a 2-week hiatus before I went to jail for 6 years. So in my mind, I was getting ready to go party with all my friends. It was like the going away party, right? And as God would have it, 3 days before I was supposed to return back to court, I was in the mall, walking around the mall, just, aimlessly walking around. And a gentleman by the name of Corey Oliver walked up to me and said, "Have you ever thought about joining the military?" And when he asked me that question, I looked him in the eyes. And I don't know if you've ever had this moment, or if anybody listening to us right now has ever had that moment of you made a decision and you weren't fully aware where that decision was going to lead. You weren't really aware of the impact that that decision was going to have. But when I told Corey, I said, "Come on, let's go." He looked at me and he's like, "Are you serious?" Because a couple of days later, he told me that he had walked that mall as an Army recruiter for a whole year and hadn't put anybody in the military. So he was as shocked as I was when I said yes. And so to go all the way back to your question, what was the mental shift? Even before I knew it, the shift was you got to make better choices. That was the first thing I did without even realizing what I was doing. I made a better choice for my life. When I said, "Come on, let's go," and I said I was going to go into the United States Army, that was a choice that I didn't fully understand the weight of right then, but it absolutely began the transformation process in my life.
Wow, man, that's an awesome story. And so you were in the streets, and in the streets, in the gangs, there's a hierarchy, there's
Mhm.
leadership, and I know that you're a leadership expert. And so, what parallels do you see with the leadership that maybe you experienced in that gang environment that are similar, or lessons that could be learned that can be carried to a corporate environment?
Man, that's a powerful question. And many people don't ask me that question, but I really do lean on a lot of things that I learned growing up in the inner city, things that I learned, even though it was a negative to be in a gang, I really did learn some positives. So when you think about leadership and you think about influence, that's what leadership really is. It's influence. And so when I look at the people that I used to model inside the gang, why they had influence, it was their reputation. Wherever that reputation was, it was their reputation. So even when I look at corporate America and I look at leadership inside corporate America, you're going to be measured by your reputation. What do other people think about you? And so when I look at that parallel, when I look up the people that I used to look up to, they had what we would call in the street name recognition, right? So when you think about a leader inside of corporate America, what are people saying about you? When I go across this nation and I talk to leaders, I tell them, you're the conversation at the dinner table, whether you know it or not. When that individual gets home, their spouse asks them, "How did today go?" Their interaction with you is probably going to be on the table. You know how Will is. Will was being a jerk again. Or, you know what? I love working for this company because I have an amazing leader. And so when I think about the parallel, leaders had name recognition. They had a reputation of getting things done, right? We called it in the streets, putting in work, right? And so even today, I use that same phraseology, and I say, you got to do the work. So in the street, it was putting in the work. In corporate America, you got to do the work. So leaders that do the work, your team is seeing you. They're seeing you not just as the person that's sitting in the office with your feet kicked up and smoking on a cigar, but they really see that you're putting in the work.
Wow. And so, what you're really talking about is like organization culture, and just the fact that, yeah, as a leader, you have to lead from the front. And so, what do you feel is the biggest mistake that leaders often make in regards to trying to establish a winning culture for their organization?
Yeah, that's great. One of the biggest mistakes is they expect things that they haven't taught. They expect things that they haven't taught. And so when I was in the military, we would always have inspections. Like we would have room inspections, we would have uniform inspections. And I remember one time we were going through this inspection and I was with my supervisor, and we were inspecting some soldiers, and one of the soldiers didn't have his locker together, or something like that. And he said to the first sergeant, he says, "No one ever taught me that. No one ever taught me that." And my first sergeant immediately turned to me and said, "Then Moreland, that's your fault. We can't inspect, or we can't expect something from this soldier that he's never been taught." And so a lot of leaders, they want to have this culture. They want to have this family environment. They want to have this culture of excellence, but they haven't really taught what a culture of excellence is. We think vision and we think mission is words on a picture in the lobby, right? But it's more than just putting up an eagle and putting up, this picture and saying, "Oh, we have a fantastic culture." You got to ask yourself, as a leader, have I really communicated what an excellent culture looks like? Have I really communicated what a winning culture is? And that starts with communication.
And I love what you said about the military. I'm mentoring some high school students right now, and a few of them are going in the military. And I tell them, I said, the military is going to teach you everything you need to know. You're coming in their mind as a blank slate, and they're going to show you everything because it's just part of the system. And so I love what you said as far as how that first sergeant turned to you and was like, "Hey, you didn't teach this guy. So
Yeah.
we can't have that expectation for him." And so, man, great stuff right there. And so, what causes an organization, I guess, just to focus on checking the box as opposed to taking things to a whole nother level? And, I think that's important for organizations, but also for us as individuals. And so, what are your thoughts on that? What has helped you really level up?
Yeah. So to really understand that, when you talk about organization culture, when you talk about personal development, it has to be an intentionality there. You have to be intentional. I always tell people success is not an accident. Success is intentional. So when I'm looking
Mm,
at personal development, whether I'm looking at organizational success, I'm talking to leaders and I'm saying, okay, what are we intentional about? For me, it starts with a vision. It starts with a vision. And so for your life and for your organization, what's that vision? Where do you see yourself 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Because I want you to understand that it's going to be a journey. It's not going to happen overnight. And a lot of times we want things to happen overnight. We want things to happen just because it's a desire, but that's not going to happen. When I talk about changing your life, when I talk about, for me, when I go back to that 19-year-old kid, I had been living like this with this mindset for 19 years. That was the mindset. So let me give you a quick example. So when I joined the military, I go to basic training, I go to my AIT, and now I'm at my duty station. That's about a 4 to 6 month process from me being removed from the streets. So I'm in a new environment. I'm in a new location. I'm stationed in Germany. I'm 8,000 miles away from Compton physically, but mentally, I'm still in Compton. And so what did that mean? I'm still seeing the world through the eyes of this kid in Compton. I'm still seeing the world through how I acted when I was in Compton, California. So I almost got kicked out the military my first couple of months in, because I was still handling situations the way I handled them in Compton, California.
yeah,
And
I was
so
gonna
I
I was gonna ask you that. Because I saw soldiers that were in that same situation that, yeah, that
they
street
couldn't
life, they couldn't let it go.
they couldn't let it go, right? And
Mhm.
I had once again, I call these disruptors. So the first disruptor was Corey. The second disruptor was the judge, and now I meet my third disruptor, who was Command Sergeant Major Babs, who pulled me into his office and said, "Man, we're getting ready to kick you out the Army, man. I just read your record. you're from Compton, man. If I send you back to Compton, what do you think is going to happen to you? And I said, man, Sergeant Major, probably end up in jail or probably end up dead. He said, you're absolutely right. And he began to share with me that type of mindset that I had was not going to benefit me. And here's vision again. He asked me this question. He says, where do you see yourself in 5 years, Moreland? Where do you see yourself? And no one had ever asked me that question before, because everybody used to tell me, man, you're going to end up in jail, or you're going to end up dead, you're going to end up like your dad, all that kind of stuff. No one ever asked me to think beyond or to look beyond my present conditions. And so when Sergeant Major asked me that question, he says, I want you to go home this weekend, and on Monday, I want you to come back and tell me, where do you want your life to go? Where do you see your life going? And I came back and I said, the first thing is I want to be a great soldier. I want to be the best soldier I can be. The second thing is I want to get back into school. I want to get my education. I want to get my degree. And he says, well, I can help you with that. If you're committed to that, So you first have to have a vision. So he showed me I had to have a vision. I had to see myself in the future. The second thing is I had to make a commitment. I had to make a commitment to what I just said. And here's where so many people fall by the wayside. They haven't made a commitment. One of the things a commitment does is it sets boundaries for you. You now have something to evaluate your actions. See, when I didn't have a vision, I used to say things like, Tupac had a famous song, "To live and die in LA, to live and die in LA." That was my mantra, to live and die in LA. I didn't see me going around the world. I didn't see me going to Texas. I didn't see me going to New York. I didn't see me going to London. I didn't see me to live and die in LA. That's what I'm going to do. I'm about to live and die. That's the vision that I had. So when someone would say, man, don't do that because you may lose your life, my mindset was, you got to die someday. You got to die someday. I had no vision, right? So as I look here in my office, I have two beautiful pictures of my grandkids, Nyla and Aaron. I have a vision. I want to see them graduate high school. I want to see them get married. So what does that say to today? That says to me, that's the vision. So what do I need to do today? I need to make sure I eat better. I need to make sure that I'm healthy. I need to make sure that I'm working out. I need to make sure that I'm doing everything possible so I'm still here 20 and 30 years from today. And so you have to have vision. You have to make a commitment. And then the third thing is you got to implement the right actions. You got to implement, we call them habits, we call them practices, but you got to implement on a daily basis the right actions. We call it in our coaching program MSID, MSID, making small improvements daily. What are you doing every single day to get better?
I love it. And so I know you're real big on frameworks, and I know something that I'm not too familiar with, but I guess that you've come out with is the 9 to 5 framework. And so tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, man, I'm really super excited about the Beyond 9 to 5 framework. And I pulled this from my days in the military. So you'll remember this, that in the military, when you're a leader, you're responsible for those you lead 24 hours a day. That's very different than traditional corporate 9 to 5. You're usually responsible for your employees when they clock in and when they clock out. But in the military, Mills, we were responsible for the entire soldier. If you didn't pay your phone bill, if you didn't pay your mortgage or your rent, I, as your leader, had to answer to the sergeant major or the first sergeant about that. And so we came up with this Beyond 9 to 5 to get leaders to start looking at their people beyond the title, beyond that's Mills, the HR guy, or that's Mills, the IT guy. Trying to get leaders to understand, if you really want your employees and your team members to perform at a high level, they have to know that you care about them beyond 9 to 5. They have to know that you're really concerned about their well-being, their overall well-being. And once again, I had this sergeant major that when I worked for him, I would drive him around and he would go around and he would see soldiers on the base and he would ask them, how's your wife doing? How's your kids doing? Hey, did you get that pay problem situation? Hey, how's your promotion going? He showed them that he cared about them beyond them just being a soldier. And the way they responded to him, meaning when he wasn't around, they wanted to do their best. When he wasn't around, they wanted to shine for him. And I tell leaders all the time, when your team and when your employees know that you care for them, they will shine for you.
So what if I'm that principal of a campus or a store manager, Walmart store manager, and I'm like, yeah, that sounds all good, but man, my job is just too overwhelming for that. How
Yeah.
am I going to do that for 200 people or whatever? What would you tell that person?
You know what? And that's a real serious problem. And when we were putting this together, when we were putting this framework together, I talked with my team and I said, you know what? I want to provide leaders with solutions. I don't want to come with that fuzzy kumbaya stuff because we know working in corporate America, it's hard. It's tough. We have KPIs. We have deadlines. If you're a public traded company, you have shareholders that say, hey, it's the bottom line. We want to see this revenue. So that's really serious. And so that's why we have so many principals and teachers and leaders burning out, right? So to answer your question, for me, it's about getting a plan. And that's what Beyond 9 to 5 helps organizations do. We provide them with the plan. One of the things that we have is this tool that we call the 1 minute huddle, the 1 minute huddle. And what the 1 minute huddle allows you to do is connect with your team members outside of a work environment, outside of asking them, did you get that email, asking them about the KPIs, but just going to them. And I want to say this as well, because this is, once again, not something that happens overnight. This is something that happens over time. But with these 1 minute huddles, the concept is that if you're a manager, if you're a leader and you're leading 15 people, if you're leading 20 people, to meet with each of them for just 1 minute. 1 minute. And I tell leaders all the time, you have 1 minute. Even if you're leading 30 people, you have 30 minutes. And then they always tell me, it's not going to be 1 minute. Somebody's going to want 20 minutes. Somebody's going to want, that may happen, but that's not going to happen every time. So let's not make that the excuse of why we don't implement this, right? But Mills, just think about it. If your supervisor came up to you and said, hey, Mills, can I talk to you for a second? And you're probably think, oh my God, what did I do? And then you get to the office or you're walking down the hall and he just says, or she just says, hey, I just wanted to check on you. How's everything going? How's the family doing? Now, initially, what's going to happen, Mills? More than likely, Mills is going to be like, oh, he doesn't really care. She really doesn't care. So that's why, here's that word again, commitment. As a leader, you got to be committed to this practice. You got to be committed to this 1 minute huddle. Because Mills, when I grew up, we had this saying, whatever happens in this house, what? Stays in this house. So these are the people that you're leading. This is how they think. They're not just going to open up to you and start spilling their guts. You know what I mean? And so you got to be committed to making this connection. So that's just one of the tools that we use with leaders to help them make the connection. And once again, we're always overemphasizing this is not going to happen overnight. This is going to happen over time.
And I feel you on that, because when I was in the military, and I tell people this all the time, that the military, a lot of times people look at it from the outside and they think it's just this G.I. Joe organization. And I said, they are really big on getting to know your people, and so I know, like, when I supervise soldiers, I really got a chance to know them. And, I had this one kid from Montana and he's like, hey, Sergeant, I never saw a black person before. But he's like, you're like one of the first black people I've ever encountered, of course, being in the military. And we had a great relationship. I knew what he liked and everything. He knew about me. And it really got buy-in from him when it was time to get stuff done, and just a level of respect. And I think oftentimes in the civilian world, like you said, they don't want to invest maybe that minute, that 2 minutes to get to know someone. And yeah, it is a process. Like, yeah, this guy wasn't spilling out his guts to me the first time I talked to him, but then that keyword trust was built,
Mhm.
and then we were able to, take it to, I guess, another level where he felt very comfortable. And I remember one time even telling him, "Hey, I'm having car problems." He'd say, "Hey, Sergeant, bring your car to me. I love fixing cars and stuff." And so it's things like that I think the corporate environment and the education environment, those are things that I feel like they can apply and would really help the quote unquote mission.
That's what Beyond 9 to 5 is all about, bringing that military philosophy into corporate America, bringing it into the education world, the two worlds that I invest a lot of time in, because that really wants, when you have employees, most employees have the mindset of, you don't pay me for that. I don't get paid for that. I'm only working 9 to 5. So we even have a component of this training where we teach employees how to go beyond the 9 to 5. And it's not necessarily we want you to work beyond 9 to 5, but it's just this philosophy that we're connected to the mission. Mills, you remember this, that they taught us that we're soldiers 24 hours a day. We're soldiers 24 hours a day. So you remember that first time when you went on leave and they would say, remember, you're a soldier. You're a soldier. So even though you're not on base, even though you're on vacation, they wanted me to know that my activity still represented the United States Army. So I remember telling my boys, "Hey, man, I can't do that, man. I'm a soldier. Hey, man, I can't get in the car with you, man. Man, do you got something illegal in here? Man, I'm a soldier. I can't get caught with that," right? That was a mindset shift. And so the more leaders can get employees to understand that you're part of this mission, that you're valuable to this mission. So when you leave here on Friday, I don't want you to do anything that's going to jeopardize you being able to come back here on Monday and be your best self. And we're going to do everything as leaders to make sure it's a two-way street, right? I want you to give 100% the same way you want us to pay you every 2 weeks. You wouldn't want us to miss your paycheck. We don't want you to miss the opportunity to be your best. And so we've been teaching organizations this duality of how employees can go beyond 9 to 5 and how leaders can go beyond 9 to 5 to create a better organization.
And so talking about, culture and the organization and everything, what behaviors silently destroy culture that oftentimes just go overlooked or unchecked that people just let them get away with?
Yeah, and so one of the big ones is individuality. Remember, if we're going to win, winning is a team sport. And so a lot of times, many employees, they will get a job, and they will get a job because they need a job, right? They have bills, they have things that they need to pay for, and that's really their mindset. I'm here for my family, us four and no more. And so when you have that type of attitude, you're not going to go beyond the 9 to 5. Once again, teaching this from a military perspective, each of us always had a battle buddy, right? Somebody that you was responsible for, and they were responsible for you, and they held each other accountable. So I can remember all the way back to basic training, if my battle buddy was late to formation, I got in trouble because I allowed him to be late. And so holding each other accountable, right? When we don't have accountability inside of an organization. So when you have individuality, people that just have this individual attitude, and then when we don't have accountability, when you just complain about Will being late from lunch every day, but you don't pull Will aside and say, "Hey, man, I know it's only 5 minutes. I know it's only 10 minutes, man, but that's not what we want to display here in our organization, man. That's not the type of culture that we want to have." Now, once again, is everybody going to be on board with this? Are you going to have some people that look at you kind of crazy? But overall, we've seen this, we've tested this, we have the numbers on this, that overall, people want to be a part of a winning organization. People want to be held accountable. And so when you have accountability, it leads to this word that we know in the military called standards. Man, what's the standards here? And I tell leaders all the time, whenever I have a team, I tell them, this is the standard. Inside our company, we have this thing inside the MTA. Our number one rule is don't be a jerk. Don't be a jerk. And jerk is an acronym that stands for don't be judgmental. Don't be egotistical. Don't be repulsive, and don't be a knucklehead. And so if you're displaying any of those behaviors, someone is going to pull you to the side and say, hey, man, you've been a jerk. You've been a jerk. And we don't want any jerks working in our organization. And so we share this with the organizations that we work with. You got to have a standard. And I tell my employees, listen, I will never fire you. The standard will fire you. I'll never fire you because I'm going to hold you to the standard. And if you violate the standard, that's how you take emotion out of it. You can be my best friend, my best buddy, whatever. You can be a family member. If you violate the standard, because I'm here to uphold the standard. So if you violate the standard, then the standard is what fired you and not the company.
Wow. Oh, I love that. Don't be a jerk.
Don't be a jerk, man.
So I'm going to take this in a more, I guess, personal development direction. And so with, us men, a lot of times we have, this is something, I don't know if there's sound or something. I'm hearing different sounds. Okay, there we go. As men, you talked about standards, and I love that. I've been looking at this one book by Scott Galloway. It's called Notes to Be a Man. And one of the things he talks about is that as men, we do need to have high standards for ourselves. We need to have a commitment to excellence. And, you're a man who has, had a huge transformation throughout your life. And so just want you to kind of maybe give your thoughts on how your standards for yourself, how your commitment to excellence have evolved over time.
Great question. Once again, the standard, let me say this, and just specifically talking to manhood, it's hard. It's hard to be a man, right? It's hard. I was just talking to my son-in-law, and I was sharing with him, they just welcomed our second grandchild. And I told him, I said, to be a good father, it's hard. It's hard. That's why a lot of people punch out. That's why a lot of people walk away, because it's hard. To be a great father is not just to be present. For me, I didn't grow up with my father. And so level one was, okay, if I'm just in the house, that's enough. Then I realized, no, that's not enough just to be in the house. I have to have conversations. I have to set the standard. And so I told my son-in-law, I said, okay, you have a daughter now and you have a son now. Your son is going to watch you and see how you treat women. More importantly, his mother. Your daughter is going to see how you treat her mom to know how a woman should be treated. And so the lens of responsibility as it relates to being a man, you have to have these standards, because if you don't have these standards, once again, you don't have these boundaries of, for me, I'm a Christian. And so the Bible says a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. It goes back to what we talked about earlier about vision. So as a man, you have to have a vision for your family. I've always had a vision for my family. And so then that takes me back to how do I, one of the visions that I had for my daughter was to walk her down the aisle when she got married. Well, that doesn't start when she gets proposed to. That starts when she's 5 years old, 6 years old, and I'm taking her on daddy-daughter dates, and I'm speaking to her, and I'm telling her about her self-worth, and I'm telling her about how intelligent she is, how smart she is, how beautiful she is. I'm having conversations with her. I'm having the tough conversations with her because I have a vision of what I want our relationship to look like when she turns 25, when she turns 26. The same thing with my son. I have a vision of the type of man that I want him to be. And so we have this thing every summer that we call Man Camp, where I'm taking him through all these things that he needs to know as a man. I'm intentional about the type of man I want him to be. And so when I think about manhood, it's number one, it's very difficult. So you have to be intentional about the type of man that you want to be, and then set standards and guardrails so you can meet those standards.
Man, I love it. I love it. And, I appreciate you, sharing, those experiences that you had with your kids, because I'm sure that's going to enlighten somebody that's listening, because oftentimes we, like you said, many of us are coming from environments where we maybe didn't have a role model to pattern ourselves after, or maybe there weren't good role models to pattern ourselves after.
And Mills, can I say something to that? Um, Me, because I didn't have that example, being a father didn't come natural to me. It did not come natural to me. And so when I hear other guys, yeah, me and my dad, we used to toss the football and we used to toss the baseball and we would go fishing. I didn't have any of that. And so I remember one day, I'm at the gas station and my son is in the back seat and I get out to pump the gas and he's sitting in the back seat. And I thought for a minute, wait a minute, why am I out here pumping the gas and he's sitting in the car? Well, I had to be, wait, Will, if you don't teach him, how's he going to know? And so, but that didn't come first nature to me. It wasn't first nature to me. And so I had to be intentional. So I read books, I read, articles on how to raise kids. And so once again, to the men that are listening to me, even though you didn't have the example, that can't still be an excuse. You have to be intentional about being a better father. And just once again, being present isn't enough, right? I realized that I had to have time with, my wife taught me this. We're entrepreneurs, Mills, and we're always trying to kill two birds with one stone. And so I would try to kill two birds with one stone, and I would be like, okay, we're going to this event. I got to go speak. I'm just going to take my wife with me, and that's going to be date night. So that's going to be date night. We get a free meal. And she came back and was like, bruh, that's not date night. That don't even count, right? So I then had to be intentional about, okay, we got to have date night. And then I would take the family out. And then I realized, oh, okay, but taking the family out is not investing one-on-one time with my son. Taking the family out is not investing one-on-one time with my daughter. And so I had a guy by the name of Dr. David, Dr. Phelps. He gave me this wisdom years ago, and I adopted it because I saw his family 1 year in a hotel. I met them in a hotel, and he had all of his kids. He had all his grandkids, great grandkids there. And I said, how did you create this? I see everybody smiling and everybody wants to be around. Everybody's excited about investing time. It was Christmas time. And he says, he was a dentist. He said earlier on when I had my practice, I didn't have anything in my life that was going to compete for my family's time. So he said, as my other friends were going out golfing and all that type of stuff, he said, I didn't get involved in all of that because I wanted to invest time with my family because this is what I wanted when I got older. And so I kind of adopted that. I tried not to have anything. My son is only 15, so he's involved in sports now, and I'm as much as possible at every game and things like that. And when my daughter was in the house, the things that she was involved in, I tried to make sure that I was involved in those things. And so now that my daughter's now married and she has kids now, we just were with her for the whole month of January, and it was a beautiful time. Like, imagine I was in her house and we got along for a whole month. She didn't have to kick me out or anything like that, right? And so, but that's what we always wanted. Every December, her and her husband, they come home to share time with us. And so that's what we wanted, but we had to be intentional about that.
Mm. You're really big on being intentional, and I love the examples that you share. But what if we have that listener that's like, well, my life doesn't allow for that, or there's a lot of focus on self-care.
Mhm.
And so people talk about, well, hey, you can't always just be devoting your time to your kids or your wife or whatever else. What would you say to those people that, say, hey, you got to kind of have that downtime for yourself too?
Yeah, so we have this thing that we call you have that where people talk about that work-life balance or that self-family balance. Well, what we've realized is that there's no such thing as balance. So just throw that out the way, right? There's never going to be balance. There's not enough time in the day to be balanced. You're not going to have 8 hours to sleep, 8 hours to work, 8 hours for your spouse, 8 hours for each kid. You're just not going to get that time. We all have 24 hours a day, 168 hours a week. So what do we have? If we can't have balance, what can we have? We can have what I call harmony. And so what we try to achieve in our relationships is harmony. And that goes back to just having that conversation. Yes, I think it's very important that you have self-care. The Bible says it like this. It says, love your neighbor as yourself. So if you're not loving yourself, then you're not going to effectively love other people. And if you are loving other people without loving yourself, you're going to eventually burn out, what you're talking about. So for me, it's about harmony. There's going to be different seasons of your life. Like for me, if I'm working on a project, then I'm going to talk to my family and say, for the next 2 to 3 weeks, I'm getting ready to be dialed in. I'm working on this project. I need to finish it. So I'm probably not going to be able to come to this event, or I'm probably going to miss a couple of dinners. But because we had the conversation, we've created harmony. My son is playing sports. I look at my schedule. I look at his schedule. I let him know, hey, I see you have a game on this day. I'm going to be traveling. I'm not going to be able to make it to that game. And so because we communicated about it, he's not expecting for me to be there. He already knows I'm not going to be there. I remember one time my daughter, she was in a school play, and she was also doing something with the Girl Scouts. And I looked at my schedule. I wasn't going to be able to make both of them. I was going to try to make one of them. And I had a conversation with her, and I said, hey, Kara, out of this school play or this thing that you're doing with the Girl Scouts, which one would you prefer me to come to? And she says, oh, Dad, I'm just a tree in the school play. That's no big deal. It's nothing, to see. I'm just a tree. And so because we had that conversation, I found out that the Girl Scout event was more meaningful for her. And so things like that. So the more you can have conversations with the people that you're invested in, the people that you're doing community and family with, the more you can create harmony. And so if you think about it like an orchestra, you want all the instruments to be playing harmoniously, but at the same time, some songs, all the instruments aren't playing. This song may just be for the string instruments. This song may just be for the horns. I'm always reminded of that one little, I don't even know what they call that triangle thing, right? He rarely gets any shine, right? But when it's time, ding, he's right on key. And so, with my wife, she may have some things going on in her life where she says, hey, I'm focusing on this in this season. Dinner's not going to be every night at this time or whatever. But the more, your family, your organization, the more you guys communicate, the more you can create harmony.
Oh man, this has just been fantastic. And so we're very close to the end. Gosh, so much wisdom and some great takeaways. Had a question for you though. Well, before I get to the last question, what do you have coming up? What do you have coming up? What do you want to share with the audience? What if somebody wants to reach out to you for your services?
Yeah, definitely. I love to connect on social media. So on all social media handles, it's at DrWill Speaks. That's Instagram, TikTok, all that kind of stuff. On Facebook and LinkedIn, it's just Will Moreland. Look up DrWill Moreland. You can find me. If you're a leader, if you're an organization looking to take your leadership, looking to take your culture to the next level, I would love to partner with you to help you on that journey. Our website is Moreland morelandtraining.com. Just go to morelandtraining.com and you can fill out an info sheet and get in contact with us and reach out to us. But yeah, that's what I have. Man, we're really excited about this new framework, Beyond 9 to 5. We just launched, and we've just been going around partnering with organizations to help them go to the next level. So that's what really has me super excited, because I really believe that this framework is going to change the culture, the workplace, when both the employee and leadership understand that we have to go beyond the 9 to 5, meaning we have to just go beyond the necessary, go beyond the mundane if we want to create cultures of excellence.
My last question. If you could speak to your 16-year-old self in Compton, being who you are right now, what would you say?
Man, that's a powerful question. 16, I'm thinking about what trouble I was getting into at 16. Man, if I could tell that guy, man, if you could just make some better choices, if you can make, I know life, because it's interesting, because that span of time for me from the age of 12 to the age of 19, that 7-year period was very tough for me. So if I could just tell that 16-year-old, hey man, you're just one decision, one choice away from your whole life changing. If you would just make one better decision, your life would change.
Dr. Will, I thank you so much for coming on our show. I mean, you really blessed us with some great wisdom, and your story is just inspiring. The transformation, I think it can hit home for anyone, male, female, whatever age they are, because transformation can happen at any time. So again, I thank you so much for coming on.
Man, I appreciate you, man. And I always want to champion and give you your roses, man, for the community that you have built and for all that you do to serve the speaking industry, the education industry. Thank you so much, man, for showing up in your brilliance. I see you. And so I don't want that to go unrecognized, man. Thank you for the community that you have curated, man. You're always pouring in wisdom to us. And so I appreciate everything you do, man.
All right, much appreciated. And so with that being said, change happens one person at a time, 1 second at a time. Let's go.